Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. I'm your host, Stephen Peinecker, and look who's in the house, Jaxon Washburn. You were one of my early guests. I had maybe 150 subscribers, and the myth, the legend, Jaxon Washburn, who's currently
Oh
a
my
student
gosh.
at the Harvard Divinity School, is back on the program. Welcome back, dude.
Thanks so much, Steve. I really appreciate it. It's
So I
wonderful
just
being here.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. Just want to reminder, folks, just a little housekeeping here. This month's book drawing is "Rescuing the Restoration." The Lord Sets His Hands, and this is actually came out of out of the ashes of a project that Brian Hales attempted to start, which is engaging the Snufferite movement or the Restorationist movement in that group, and it's a series of scholarly papers about that. So, in the link in the description, just put in the book contest in the subject heading if you're interested in this month's book. So. Last time I had you on, we were just both you were about ready to embark on your journey, and this journey includes becoming a student at Harvard University Divinity School. And also, shortly after you coming on my program, uh, you came out. And I want to just briefly talk a little bit about that, because that's kind of the elephant in the room, because this is your first interview since coming out, as far as I know. And you come out as bisexual, and also you but also part of that coming out process was also that you shared with people that you had received a letter from Elder Holland. And I don't know how much details you want to give, but you had mentioned that. So I just want to talk a little bit about, one, what made you decide to come out, and the way that you did it, and how has your life been since coming out?
Yeah, well, it's certainly been a minute since that took place. Basically, my first day at Harvard Divinity was when I kind of posted publicly about it. But it's something I had been thinking of for a while, that I had been contemplating, trying to find language for, trying to, really land on a place where I felt comfortable with certain like labels or terms or things like that. But yeah, I did come out as a bisexual shortly after starting at Harvard Divinity School. And part of that process, I think what prompted me was just a lot of the public conversations that were taking place in the wake of Elder Holland's BYU address in it was like, towards the end of summer of 2021, or I think it was August. Um, and yeah, so as part of that kind of reflective process, I ended up writing Elder Holland a letter, sending it to him, and to my surprise, receiving a response, which I found to be very gracious. I appreciated that he responded to me, and not there wasn't much that was said. I haven't shared his response just out of respect, but so it wasn't necessarily lengthy. But he expressed gratitude for what I had sent him, and for sharing my own thoughts and experiences with him, and also kind of recognized there seemed to be a recognition there that his BYU talk perhaps could have been worded differently or approached differently, and that he had been receiving feedback from different folks. So anyways, I appreciated it. I thought it was a very kind gesture. um, and the letter that I wrote him is accessible through my blog. I That's kind of what I used to come out publicly, was also sharing that letter publicly. So yeah, that kind of marked the beginning of my experience at Harvard Divinity. I kind of waited until I had moved to Massachusetts to kind of make that announcement. But in terms of life since then, I can't think of really any downsides to my experience or decision. If anything, I've felt even a greater sense of comfort and peace in my own spirituality, and my own kind of like social standing. It hasn't negatively impacted any relationships that I'm aware of. People were very supportive, and within specific like LDS contexts, I've only been received well, and felt, I don't know, included. I haven't felt like I've been treated any differently. So everything there has been, very positive too. So I've really appreciated that. I have a really good student, singles ward that I attend in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And yeah, like it, I don't know. I haven't really talked a whole lot publicly about it just because, honestly, um, I don't totally feel like there's much there to be said. And like, yes, I did make an announcement, but honestly, my life stayed, relatively the same. I haven't massively changed who I am or what I believe or anything like that. So honestly, it just I don't feel like it's often that relevant to the things that I discuss
Mhm.
or talk about. Um, I'm certainly not opposed to talking about it with anyone. But I don't know. At least in that sense, I certainly have friends who identify as LGBT, and in terms of their own self-identity, their external presentation, things like that, their sexual orientation occupies a much larger space in their life. And to me, I don't know, I'm still just dating. I'm still just trying to have my own life experiences, and it hasn't really stirred things up too much. But yes, I did have that experience, and I did appreciate Holland's response, and I've definitely, since then, there's still been growth, of course. It's not like my journey has been static by any means. But I guess I just don't think of it as one of the more remarkable things about myself, So
Yeah, sure.
um, yeah, that's, if there's any reason why, I don't discuss it a lot, it's I guess I haven't necessarily felt prompted to, but in the future, if I ever do, or it feels relevant, or it could be helpful to someone, or things like that, it's certainly not a topic I'm averse to discussing either. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting thing, and it's a journey. So I still expect change and growth, and just more personal learning, and we're all on we're all on journeys. So I just anticipate change over time.
Yeah, so and folks, I want to thank Jaxon for agreeing to come onto my program, because our main emphasis of this episode is not about that. It's going to actually be about Jaxon's journey over since the summer of 2021, starting at Divinity School, but also taking a physical journey to various religious sites, including Christian and Restorationists and other groups, and his experiences with them as part of his journey. So we're going to actually do like a little slideshow. But before we get to that, I do want to kind of get back to what we just talked about, because of course we both kind of had public coming outs, because of course I went on Mormon Stories and talked about my sexuality, and I deliberately kept it to the end, so the very last episode. So it was on from Monday through Friday, and it was on the Friday episode after people had already consumed about 10 hours of content of me, that I laid it out, because I thought it was important, because my sexuality does inform me, but it's not central to who I am. But it really was very difficult being raised in a high demand religion, evangelical Christianity, with some fundamentalist overtones, right? And what they felt about it. And
Hmm.
so I felt like you and I had similar experiences in that regard. And it's just cool for us to be able to sit down and, more importantly, both be comfortable in our own skin and can share this with the audience. But more importantly, for those of you who maybe are in the closet, um, you know, it you can do this, right? We can have these conversations. I just want to make my audience feel comfortable about this. Now, not everybody agrees with being gay, whatever, don't care. The main thing is that we're having these important dialogues and conversations. And so thank you very much, Jaxon. I'm going to get off
Yeah.
this.
Well,
And
those tensions, it doesn't always just come from folks who, might say, like they're against being gay or being bisexual or something, right? It can also come from folks who insist that those identities can't successfully or healthily coexist, alongside religious identities as well. folks who might insist that you can't be Mormon and LGBT, you can't be Christian, evangelical and LGBT or something like that, right? So there's a lot of ways in which we try and draw boxes, around people and around ourselves. But yeah, I guess that's one thing I've appreciated with my own journey, is that a lot of times, whether it's through dialogue with other people or just in my own journey, a lot of those categories and boxes break down a little bit, right?
Very true. And it's so interesting because I heard from people throughout the world letters, emails, and just tons of people reaching out. People who are gay or had gay children. I had breakfast the next day with a man who has a gay son who's a Mormon, and so the reason why I waited to the very end was because I literally there was a Christian from a Restorationist church, the Church of Christ, Protestant Restoration Church, and they said,
Mm-hmm.
I watched Steve's interview all this week, and I didn't think it was possible to be a Christian and a gay man. Changed my mind, and that was a beautiful moment for me. Because that's why I deliberately left it to the end, because I didn't want people to view me through a particular prism that I'm a gay man. No, I am a Christian man who happens to be gay, right? And that's kind of how but my sexuality and my faith inform me. And more importantly, my faith informs me more than anything. It's central
Mm-hmm.
to my identity, even though I was an atheist for 12 years, which is interesting. But the key
Yeah.
thing is that, we're able to have these conversations, and I think it's just, we're on this journey, dude, and it's really cool. So was there anything else, put a bow on this? Anything else you want to say about sexuality, or do you feel like we covered it pretty good?
I'm good.
Okay, we're
Yeah.
gonna move on. That's great. That's awesome. So this is the thing. So like you had said, right as you are entering, you come out right around the time that you're entering into Harvard Divinity School. And this is what I want to talk about with you, is because um, you started Harvard Divinity School. You're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and you're engaging others. I just want you to kind of give us an overview of what it's been like attending Harvard Divinity School.
Yeah, well, I had certain expectations. I had been wanting to attend Harvard for, a decade of my life, and had been working towards what I felt was a very lofty goal, in hoping to one day apply somehow. And yeah, eventually I was able to get accepted, and my kind of greatest hopes were have since been exceeded in virtually every capacity. I've deeply enjoyed my time at Harvard Divinity School. I'll be graduating this May, actually, so my master's program is almost finished. It's a 2-year program, and since attending, I've had the chance to just get to know and spend frequent time with some of the most passionate, intelligent, um, involved, people of faith or no faith who are attending the school with me. Perhaps they're moving in like a pastoral or ministry direction. Perhaps they are, heading in a more scholarly route. Just folks from all different kinds of religious, spiritual, and irreligious backgrounds, who are all mutually interested in religion and the many ways in which it touches and engages different dimensions of our lives, right? And so what I've loved is just the camaraderie that I felt. I've loved learning about people's stories and just getting to know them and learn about what they're studying, what they're passionate about. And I'm not the only Latter-day Saint at Harvard Divinity either. In fact, my cohort, the group that I arrived with during my time, Harvard Divinity School has had its largest Latter-day Saint student population in its history. When a couple semesters I was there, we had upwards of 8 students who were LDS and part of the program, and that would represent roughly 3 to 4% of the student population. There's several hundred folks at Harvard Divinity School, but we had a good handful of LDS students, and then now we also, since then, the numbers have changed a little bit. Some folks graduate, and others have joined the program. Thomas McConkey, who is known for his kind of Latter-day Saint Buddhist like dual identity and practice. He's at Harvard Divinity as well now. And we have two staff members, and then a professor, Dr. David Holland, the son of Elder Holland, actually. I've been able to take several classes from him during my application process to HDS. David was serving as the acting dean of the Divinity School. He's since, stepped back into his regular professorship. But I've been able to take several classes from him. Yeah, I mean, it's just been incredible having the opportunity to study with some truly amazing scholars, folks who, when I was doing my undergrad at Arizona State University, we had kind of extended modules, in different courses where, maybe a whole section would be devoted to the work of this scholar, who now I'm able to take classes, like 12-person classes directly from them at the Divinity School. So it's just been wonderful. Folks like Dr. Diana Eck, who was the founder of the pluralism program at Harvard, and has been deeply involved in promoting interreligious dialogue, understanding, and pluralistic values for decades now. There's also Dr. Catherine Breckus, who is, without exaggeration, probably the foremost scholar of American religion, certainly in the United States, if not the world. Dr. Karen King, whose work with the Nag Hammadi and various Gnostic texts in early Christianity has been, deeply impactful and important to that field over the 20th century. So anyways, just a number of different folks who are titans in their field, and it's just been wonderful to get to know them, to be able to study with them, and really feel like at Harvard Divinity that there's a wonderful balance in rigorous academic work, but also kind of like holistic student well-being. A lot of folks there, we're not just doing strictly academic work, although there's certainly students that are, like I mentioned, there's folks who are going in more of a ministry or counseling direction. So anyways, it strikes a really great balance of religious diversity, of kind of international diversity, of diversity of interests. Out of the several hundred students there, very few of them, if any, I would say, are studying the exact same thing. Everyone has kind of their focuses, right? I'm doing history of Christianity, but everyone has specific sub focuses, within those that are typically very unique to themselves. So we have folks studying the intersection of like Judaism and agriculture. I'm doing like Armenian Christianity, and I've ended up doing a decent amount of Mormon studies related work there as well. Yeah, so just a lot of diverse interests, and it's wonderful to see all of those come together in the classroom, to see the conversations that just naturally, organically take place, right? People will be sitting, studying in the commons area. You strike up conversation with someone, and they might be doing something completely different, right? They could be doing Islamic studies, or I don't know, be neck deep in like Tibetan Buddhist texts or something like that, right? But everyone kind of has a story of what got them interested in religion, how they ended up at a divinity school, how they explain being at a divinity school to their extended family. And yeah, so it's just a wonderful campus, and I felt very enriched and supported on spiritual, intellectual, social, so many different levels. So
Well,
it's been it's been wonderful.
Well, that's great. And I'm glad you're giving us this report. This is Jaxon giving us his report of his experience at Harvard Divinity School. And one of the reasons I actually, throughout this period of year and a half, I've been like, hey, Jaxon, you want to come on and talk about this? You want to talk about that? Because all you're doing, you're telling very interesting things that are going on. And one of the things that most fascinated me is that you have actually been engaging a evangelical student there. And you guys have done, now you haven't completed it, but you've begun the process of reading through the Book of Mormon. I would love to hear what that experience has been like for you, but also maybe what kind of experience as Andrew has related to you about that journey that you both are on.
Yeah. Now this is something that in this last semester we weren't able to visit much, but definitely over the course of the summer, I was approached by my friend, and he, after we had already had a number of different dialogues with each other about our religious upbringing, about our study interests. He hadn't met very many Mormons before. He had known some, but in terms of it's one thing to kind of know someone who identifies as a certain worldview, and it's another thing to be able to kind of talk with someone who doesn't just like identify with that worldview, but they're informed enough that they can answer complicated questions, or they know the history well, right? That's a different experience. So because both of us are interested in religion, we're both equipped to kind of make our own experiences more accessible and understandable, but also ask some deeper questions about each other's faith traditions. So anyways, I think this interest started. This friend of mine, he does a good amount of work with the Hebrew Bible, and so he's not just interested in how the Hebrew Bible or the Bible in general ends up or might be received by Latter-day Saints, but is also interested in how that has gone, about biblical reception history to Muslims or various other religious groups. Yeah, we just I was able to show him what the Book of Mormon looked like, and kind of explain what it was. Of course, he had heard about it. A lot of folks know the musical. At least they've heard of the Broadway musical, or they know that the Mormons have their Book of Mormons, right? But in terms of reading it, in terms of being familiar with its contents, that was something that I was able to share with him. And I think the main surprise at the beginning was how large the Book of Mormon is. I think to paraphrase Mark Twain, he expected more of a pamphlet of Mormon. But there's for folks who aren't familiar with the Book of Mormon, sometimes there can be assumptions or perceptions that it's maybe a rule book for how to be Mormon, or it's like kind of a laundry list of theological ideas espoused by Mormonism or something like that. But of course, it's not. And I think we've talked a little bit in my last visit about the ways in which sometimes you'll encounter folks who say that you can't actually really find too much Mormon theology in the Book of Mormon, right? That it comes off as far more like Protestant than it would contemporary LDS or something, right? So yeah, besides that, and the fact that it's a narrative history, right? It's not something like a collection of sayings, or it's not even more contemporary revelations, right? Like it situates itself in the ancient world. It insists upon its own kind of historical life, and it engages in forms of world building to flesh out the kind of world and characters and religious stage that it's operating within, right? So all of this was fairly surprising to him, but because both of us are definitely more busy during the school semester, we held off until summer to meet on a weekly basis and engage in readings with one another, or at least discussions after our readings. So I broke the Book of Mormon into maybe 12 or so different sections, and we just tackled it week by week. We weren't able to finish because he had some studies and travels in Europe to attend to, and then I later went on an extended trip myself. But we were able to get at least halfway through Alma, I would say, with kind of the intentions of hopefully, returning to those readings and conversation. But yeah, it left us with, maybe a dozen to 20 chapters of the Book of Mormon using the Latter-day Saint, the LDS kind of chapter breaks. So we tackled it by 20 or so chapters each reading. And we would just have pretty solid conversations about, okay, I would give like an overview of what's happening in the text. And fortunately as well, I was able to share with him my Maxwell Institute study edition of the Book of Mormon, as opposed to just kind of the standard blue ones that are handed out by missionaries, that have the double columns. So what's nice with the Maxwell Institute one is that it was put together by Grant Hardy, a very significant scholar in the Book of Mormon. And the way that it's sectioned, it mimics more contemporary Bible translations like the NRSV or others that try to retain and exhibit like poetry. It tries to honor the different literary forms that are used within the text. So I think it makes it much more readable. It has nice footnotes that kind of help explain things as well. It's helpful in explaining, who's the speaker, differentiating between speakers that might have the same name in the Book of Mormon, things like that. So yeah, that's what we were able to use. And the conversations were just very rich, very generous. It wasn't overly devotional in the sense of like, because this was kind of prompted by his interest, right? And so he wants to understand what's going on in the text. What is it? What purpose does it serve for Latter-day Saints? How does it relate to the Bible? So the kinds of answers, questions that we were seeking to answer were definitely more kind of academic and neutral than they were strictly like spiritual. Though, of course, we got into questions like that too of, what does the Book of Mormon mean to my own, religious life or my devotional practice. So yeah, it was just a really great experience. And I've participated in similar kinds of studies before where maybe I'm going through a Baha'i scripture, or maybe I've attended Catholic or Jewish scripture study groups. So I think there's a lot of insight. There's a lot of generative opportunity in sharing an experience like this with someone. And for folks that aren't LDS, or really just going outside of Mormon specific texts here, right? It's more than possible to read a religious text, from a place of interest, from a place of a desire to learn and understand it better, to understand kind of its native faith community better, right? Without subscribing to perhaps the religious claims that it's making, or that doesn't make you any less, whatever you identify as, right? These conversations, I think, can be just very fruitful. And I benefited from a number of insights that Andrew brought to the table, pointing things out that, I know this has been the case, for instance, with Christopher Thomas's work, Pentecostal reads the Book of Mormon, right? That I think it's Latter-day Saints need, people of other faiths to read our scriptures, and to offer their charitable, informed commentary on them, because I think it's a very enriching process. It's helped me appreciate aspects of the text more, and I just love that kind of the friendship and the relationships that can stem from these kinds of positive experiences.
I think that's really awesome, because in one sense, I was talking to you earlier. It's like in many ways we're kind of we have similar journeys, because we're kind of engaging our own personal journeys, but also our engagement with other groups and stuff like that. And I want to talk about this journey you've been on, but I have a few more questions. But I do want to ask you one quick about Andrew. Did he make any kind of observation about the Book of Mormon that because as an outsider maybe you wouldn't have seen, but or did he give you some kind of insight, something that really gave you something to ponder or of interest to the book?
Well, he definitely, being identifying as a Protestant himself, he was more equipped to be able to maybe say like, "Oh, this theology strikes me as more kind of, representative of these certain kinds of Christians," or something like that, right?
Okay.
Yeah, he was able to provide kind of insightful commentary from his own experience, but I also just loved, there's something really special, whether it's with maybe a movie, a TV show, a book, whatever, being able to see someone's first experience, and reaction, like live reaction to it, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the stuff that I just enjoyed the most was being able to kind of explain some type of narrative arc, or help tie the story together, bring the pieces together, and to just to see his reaction of, oh my gosh, like that's actually very interesting, or um yeah, just reacting to it in different ways. I'm trying to think of any specific examples. Well, I think part of it, not that he necessarily had any reactions that I thought were just super unique to himself, but a lot of other Christians, Protestants, or others, there are several things that might surprise them with the Book of Mormon. I already covered a couple with Andrew. The size of the Book of Mormon, kind of the literary structuring of the Book of Mormon, right? That it's a narrative history. It's not like a bunch of psalms, or it's not a rule book, or anything like that. And then, of course, another surprise is would be kind of how relatable he felt it was. He's reading it, and often reacted like, yeah man, like this is inspiring, or I could get behind this, or this is I have no problem with this, I have no disagreement with this passage, or this or that, right? So I always liked that. I feel like that can be a tool for building bridges, or in conversations with evangelicals or different Christians. A lot of times there's pretty intense disagreements about who Jesus is. There's disagreements about who God is, about a lot of just religious theological differences. It's easy to get bogged down on certain things like that. But there's definitely common ground here to, I think, one is like establish, and explore areas of similarity, but then use that as a kind of hinge point to clarify, okay, but there's still these differences, like I can appreciate this passage of the Book of Mormon, but it's once things develop in maybe this direction with the LDS view of the Godhead that I start getting, I can't fully go with you on that, or stuff like that. So anyways, I just really appreciated that kind of live example of what these dialogues can look like, and how they can be fruitful for everyone involved, and in different ways too.
Yeah, no, that's true. And of course, I want to remind folks, of course, my good friend, Pastor Jeff McCullough of Hello Saints is currently doing a series of reading through the Book of Mormon, which is the audience is finding very fascinating. He's giving a lot of insights, which I think is important, because, of course, and folks, I'm gonna put at the end card a link to Jaxon and I's interview, the first one, because we also talk about some not so positive engagements that you've had with the evangelicals via James White, Jeff Burden of Durban of Apologia Church, and we'll just leave it at that. I just feel it's unfortunate that that's the face of side of evangelicalism that you were exposed to. But good thing is that you also are engaging people like myself, your friend Andrew, and others who actually want to have dialogue, which is really important. And of course, interreligious dialogue is very important because, of course, we live in a world that's it's being torn apart, right? Where everybody's in the us and them camps, and often a lot of these divisions are caused by religions. So that's the important role that we can play, is to cross over these groups and actually have civil conversations and show that it can be done, but still, have your beliefs as well, which I think is important. Man, dude, you have done so much at Harvard Divinity School. I'm looking at your list here and I'm like, man, we could spend another hour talking about Harvard Divinity School, but I want to talk about the road trip. But before we do that, was there anything else about your experience over the past year and a half? And I do later want to talk about your father as well, but maybe talk about anything else about Harvard Divinity before we go on Jaxon's spiritual road trip.
Yeah. Well, I've been able to be involved with a couple different things at Harvard Divinity. I'm the president of the Latter-day Saint Student Association there, and we've been able to do kind of several things together. One of which was with the passing of the late Kate Holbrook, who was the director of women's history at the church history department. Unfortunately, she passed away this year. And so we were able to put together a nice kind of memorial tribute to her that was shared by Harvard Divinity School. I was also earlier this year able to attend the premiere of Under the Banner of Heaven when it was in Salt Lake City. And there's a lot of buzz around that. Lindsay Henson Park was incredibly generous and supportive and sending me the invite. And so I was able to attend that premiere, and in the months to follow, worked on a piece that was published through the Harvard Divinity Bulletin this in their fall-winter edition for 2022. And that piece, it's called Mormonism, the Most American Religious Other. Or let's see, yes, the Most American Religious Other. And basically, even though I started with more of a broad, or I started with more of a specific focus on Under the Banner of Heaven and just my reactions to it, both as a Latter-day Saint, but also as someone who studies Mormon history. It started as just more of a specific focus on just that show. But then as more and more specials or series or shows were released to pretty high profile streaming platforms that had to do with different Mormon topics, the editors of the Bulletin and I felt that it would be best to switch from more of a specific to more of a broad general focus of, okay, what is going on? Because there are a lot of TV shows, there's a lot of media that's being released right now that intersects with Mormonism or Mormon history in different ways. A lot of it isn't necessarily flattering, you could say. A lot of a focus on true crime, on exit narratives, and just a common kind of like motif or way that Mormons are being largely represented in media is through the lens of either being adjacent to, victims of, or perpetrators of crime. And so I kind of put that in historical context. I wanted to reflect on kind of what's been dubbed the Mormon Moment 2, in light of the first Mormon moment. I mean, frankly, society, American history is full of these Mormon moments, right? So I think that the Mormon moment from Romney's campaign, while it often points to the sense that somehow Mormonism is breaking into the mainstream more successfully, or is getting more either neutral or mainstream coverage. It's certainly not the first time that it's dominated the airwaves. It won't be the last, I think. It continues to be something that a lot of folks, both in the United States and globally, are fascinated by, afraid of, weirded out by, supportive of. So there's a lot of mixed reactions to it. I just tried to talk about, what does this tell us about the perception of Latter-day Saints and of Mormons generally in the American psyche or within Western pop culture. So I was able to publish that, and that's freely accessible online at the Harvard Divinity Bulletin website. It's also on my blog. So I was very happy to be involved with that as well.
That's great. Yeah, and we'll make sure that there are links in the description for those of you who'd like to access Jaxon's blog and whatever else we talk about on today's show. And very interesting. It's the Mormon moment. These are the two Mormon moments of the 21st century. There's many
exactly.
more to come. So, but yeah, that's the most interesting thing is, of course, I've been engaging all these different groups within the Restoration. In addition to having Dr. Jordan Cooper of Jordan Cooper of the Lutheran Church on, having Dr. Christopher Thomas on of the Pentecostal tradition. I'm going to be having Catholic theologians coming on my program now. So in addition to the Mormon talks that I'm doing with all the different various Restoration branches, I'm also bringing in Christians who have also engaged the Restoration and in one sense been on a journey. Now I have traveled. I've been to Nauvoo this past year. I've been to Independence. I've been to Salt Lake City many times. So I've been on a bit of a pilgrimage. But my pilgrimage has mostly been set in front of a computer talking to people and also doing some stuff. But what was so interesting is that you actually went on a physical pilgrimage, visiting various religious Restoration-oriented, Christian-oriented, other religious-oriented sites. And this is, of course, something that obviously is going to have an effect on your faith. So I'd like for us to kind of give a little preface here of what your mission was, what you wanted to accomplish, and what you were trying to set out to do, and then go from there. So, and I do have a quick question for you too. Was your visit with the Galeys of the Church of Jesus Christ part of this trip that you were on, or was that a separate one?
It was, yes.
Okay, good.
No, it was. In fact, actually, before we break into this, I would like to preface it with some of the experiences with the passing of my father too, because I think that's important to setting the stage.
Sure.
One thing that has happened since I was last with Steve on Mormon Book Reviews was my father had been battling leukemia for about a year, and unfortunately passed away almost a year ago. The 1 year anniversary will be in a couple days, and so he passed away last January. On January 15th, and I fortunately was able to be home with family for that. So he came home for to be on hospice for a couple days before he passed. But that's also been an extremely formative experience during my time at the Divinity School. And in fact, I joked in delivering the eulogy at his funeral. I made a joke that there's probably not a better place I could go after experiencing this than a divinity school, where about half the students are training to become pastors or counselors, therapists, etc. So I as far as receiving pastoral care and support, that's also been a wonderful and very beneficial aspect of my divinity school experience. But yeah, I mean, the last year has definitely been characterized by grief and my kind of newfound journey and experience processing that grief and reflecting on both the time that I was able to spend with my father, but also some of the different more like emotional or heavy moments, that continue to weigh on me. So I, in light of that, I made the decision. Of course, Harvard, besides offering kind of just general social support, my professors were very understanding of my situation. If there was a time where I needed maybe a small extension on an assignment or something like that, they were more than willing to help me with it. So everyone was very affirming, very caring, and that made the experience a lot more bearable. But I took a full course load. I delivered his eulogy, and attended the funeral, and then within 2 days, I was already back in Boston and starting my new school week. So it was a pretty quick transition, and I decided to just dive fully into my schoolwork. I didn't take like a reduced course load or anything. And that turned out to be very helpful, actually, occupying my time, keeping myself busy with things I'm passionate about, and close to people who support me, and that I can feel lifted up by. Anyways, if circumstances had been different, it may have been the case that I would choose to pursue some type of like job or internship over the summer, as part of just my academic track and experience. As I try to get ready to eventually apply to PhD programs. I'm going to do a gap year after I graduate, before applying. So rather than have what I would call like a productive summer, in from a strictly like academic or professional viewpoint, I felt like I needed just time to process. I needed a couple months, just to myself, to not feel too many external responsibilities or deadlines, but instead just continue to seek after forms of closure or healing. And it struck me early in the summer. I thought like, man, I need to get out. I need to just go do something spontaneous. I need to go away. Like I want something that feels very generative and like life-giving. I need something like that, that can just be kind of a gift to myself, or something that I can just do because I mean it had been a hard year. So I decided, I had the idea, why not just go on like a really long road trip, and visit like a ton of religious sites, and just literally lean into a lot of the things that I already regularly do in terms of interreligious dialogue, visiting different places of worship or communities, getting to know folks. Like why not pursue something that felt scary and ambitious and kind of spontaneous, and see if I could make a whole vacation out of it. Now, what's funny is, after deciding this, right, and in the process of trying to put this together, I approached different friends, and I'm like, I decided I'm giving myself a vacation. I'm gonna drop, to me, what was a decent amount of money, something I wouldn't normally do, especially during my kind of general busyness. And I'm gonna just get away. They're like, great, where are you going? Are you going to the Bahamas? Are you going to Mexico? They have kind of tropical locations in mind, beaches, because I'm like, I need time for myself, like I need something that's going to just be restful, and that will speak to me. And they're like, oh my gosh, the Caribbean, right? Oh no, I'm going to Jackson County, Missouri. Okay. And I decided, because I've grown up in Arizona, born in Utah, and so my encounter with restoration sites has been pretty specific to just the American Southwest, and west of the Rockies. So I visited a lot of different places in Utah, of course, in my past. I've been to some sites in Arizona, been to some in San Diego, for instance, the Mormon Battalion Center, but nothing really back east. And had visited a couple different sites in Massachusetts and in Salem and in Boston, but nothing like the Sacred Grove or anything. So what I used as the basic kind of skeleton for my trip were significant sites in restoration history. So that kind of provided the foundation, right, that I would be kind of working with. And I went as far west as Lincoln, Nebraska, and then was able to turn around. But yeah, I ended up visiting both very remarkable sites in Mormon history. But I can never just leave it just to my own tradition. I included sites from outside of different restorationist groups, Community of Christ, Church of Jesus Christ, fundamentalists, different groups. I was able to, so there was like this intra-faith dynamic, from like an umbrella view of the restoration. But I also included a number of different religious sites from both Christian and non-Christian traditions, Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, Jews, etc. So all in all, I was on the road for a little over 2 weeks, close to 3 weeks. And yeah, I mean, I was just able, and completely by myself too. I was just driving, and just had an amazing time. And while I have a historical, a kind of both like personally religious and academic interest, and yeah, invested interest in a number of these sites and these experiences. I was also processing, like this trip was a means of processing the passing of my father, and I was able to bring a framed photo of the two of us, and would kind of maybe it sounds a little silly, but I'd tuck it in, the passenger seat, with the seatbelt, and so in a sense, I felt like, I was with my dad, or these long stretches on the road where I was doing so much driving, was able to reflect on him a lot. And so the trip served as a kind of spiritual pilgrimage of sorts, where I felt like I honestly, I had expectations for what it was going to look like going into the trip. And there were a number of misadventures that took place. There were a number of random occurrences that, on when I was serving my mission in Armenia, I feel like this is this can be a common experience for a number of folks who have served missions. But sometimes you have these experiences where it just feels like your path like is orchestrated. That there's certain things that happen, certain clashes, schedule clashes, or things you have to try and resolve quickly, that end up setting you on a course that you didn't expect, but ended up being exactly what needed to happen. That for me, I take a providentialist lens to it, and definitely see these occurrences and just the way that these journeys can be shaped as ways that I feel God speaks to me, or that I'm able to whether it's seeking closure for grief or stuff like that. That there's some powerful takeaways in some of these experiences. So the last time I felt like the last time sorry, my voice is a little shot. I've been a little sick lately. But yeah, the last time I felt like just the perfect arrangement of events and personal experiences was taking place, right? Where maybe I wasn't able to visit this one site, but this other opportunity opened up immediately. That it just felt like there was some divine help in that experience and process, and I hadn't felt like that totally since my mission, because it's one thing for things like this to maybe happen over time, to appreciate the ways that life plays out long term, but I mean, this was this was, sometimes in the very minute, that I needed things to happen. And so that gave me some comfort on the road, that I both felt like this was a trip with God that I was taking, but I also felt closer to my father too. I felt like he was, there were ways in which he was looking out for me, or helping me along. And yeah, I was surprised by some of the takeaways that I had on the trip, right? And I'll have a slideshow where I can walk through some of the sites. But just quickly, um, being raised LDS and being so familiar with the tradition, um, a number of these locations, Nauvoo, Kirtland, the Sacred Grove, etc. I've been raised hearing about them. I know what they are. I know their stories. I know the significance that they hold, and it's so interesting. I think with the sacred past, that a lot of folks who they visit the Holy Land, right? And it's one thing to read about Jesus being baptized, by the Jordan River, or the River Jordan, I guess. The Jordan River's in Utah. But and it's a whole another thing to actually be there, by the waters, right? Or to be at any of these very significant sites where that are either traditionally ascribed to a certain figure, or can be located with historical confidence, right? And so it's just a very different experience. And geez, in some ways, there I want to phrase this right, because I've still been reflecting on it. But there were moments on the trip where I felt, it was so perplexing to me, but I felt like this sense of almost disappointment. I felt like this sense of like, there were times where I felt discouraged, where it felt like sometimes they tell you that it's a bad idea to meet your heroes. Maybe certain folks, they might idolize a celebrity, and then their 2 minutes of meeting them, maybe for whatever reason they're in a bad mood, and it totally taints your perception of them, or you get to know someone on a more personal level, and the things that you heard get contextualized more. So anyways, there were moments on the trip where in visiting Nauvoo, or in other times, and I think it was a mix of also, I'd been driving a lot, so I was feeling kind of fatigued. There was a lot of things I had to be responsible for, not just like my own accommodations, but just keeping on my schedule, because I had different appointments or meetings or visits lined up, and I didn't want to be late. But yeah, there were times where, for instance, in visiting Nauvoo or some of these other sites, where I guess, like, I was struck in personally, like, I felt like I was following uh the journey of the Latter-day Saint community over time, and they get pushed from one space to another, from one location to another. And whether it's in Kirtland, whether it's in Nauvoo, or in certain other locations, in Independence, right? um the Temple Lot, or places like that, where I could just feel it was like I could feel the expectations, the ambitions, the hopes, of the folks that were visiting, that were really struggling to live in these places too, working hard, impoverished, things like that. And reflecting on what that disappointment might have felt like. Of course, I'm sure I only caught a small glimpse, if anything. But I guess you know there's just that expectation versus reality, where I'm standing in Nauvoo, I'm looking around, and we have, a number of the homes that are, restored or preserved or replicated or things like that, right? We can still visit a number of these historical sites, but it's certainly not the bustling, newfound city of up to 12,000 folks, on the Mississippi, where they had utopian ideals, or this was the gathering place, right? And to just know and be familiar with what happened to make these experiences and these aspirations fall apart, and to then have to follow the saints, in their journey westward. I was tired. It had only been a couple weeks, and I can't even imagine what that felt like, especially for some of those members that joined the church, very early on, and participated in Zion's camp. They went to Missouri, they went to Ohio and Illinois, and these different places. So yeah, I guess I found myself surprised at times, because I felt this internal question of like, was it worth it? Like, did we fail?
Ooh.
Like, were these failures? And like, what does it mean for the Nauvoo or Missouri or Ohio experience to be failures? Within both Mormon self-identity and within their general history. And frankly, I kind of struggled with that, because it just felt like there is so much disappointment wrapped up in these historical sites. I love visiting them. Many of them were beautiful. I'm deeply grateful for the preservation work, that's done by multiple traditions to help maintain these sites and make them accessible to interested outsiders. But it made me reflect both on my personal journey and on the larger journey of my faith tradition that I identify within. And there was a turning point in this trip where, at the very beginning, I started and I felt just like very enthusiastic, very cheery, and as time went on, I'm getting more tired. I'm driving a lot. I'm getting more fatigued, and once I got to Omaha, Nebraska, which is where Winter Quarters is located, there's the Winter Quarters Temple. There's a Pioneer Cemetery, and I was doing the tour for Winter Quarters at the LDS visitor center there, and they had a certain room that I think was they called the memorial room, which it's pretty quiet. It has a window that overlooks the Winter Quarters Temple and the Pioneer Cemetery, and above the kind of as part of the decorative like architecture and design of this room. It feels kind of like a temple. Like it has a lot of the same like kind of trim and things like that. And it's definitely quiet and more reverent. It has some chairs. So it almost looks like maybe even a small chapel in some ways. But it has this statue that has multiple pioneers, pulling a hand cart. It's very dramatic. They look fatigued. They look, they're not having a good time. And I believe this statue is called the Triumph at Winter Quarters. And the tour guide explained that, and I'm blanking on some of the finer details, but in the process of putting the site together for Winter Quarters, preserving these, commissioning the statue to be made. That at first, I think the intent was to name that statue. Someone had used the term "the tragedy at Winter Quarters" to refer to it, and there was a general authority at the time. Maybe it was President McKay or someone. It might have been earlier too. So I'll have to go and double check. But they clarified that what happened at Winter Quarters wasn't a tragedy; it was a triumph. And these were saints, who were beleaguered. They were, fatigued. They had suffered losses. They had sacrificed so much, and were collectively still grieving the loss of not just their homes, but also Joseph Smith, Hiram Smith. That was a very traumatic blow, for many early Latter-day Saints. And they are stuck in the frontier. They're in Nebraska. This is the last stage before they make the full trek, west to the Salt Lake territory, the Salt Lake Valley, and they persevered. And there's a number of ways through which one can approach Mormon history, and certainly there was still deep tragedy that took place in many of these stories and experiences. But I guess I just felt deeply moved in that room as I was looking out. And the thing that spoke to me the most actually was, as part of the trim above the statue and this window that overlooked the Pioneer Cemetery. There is a reference from the New Testament that was carved, that I think is from the Book of Luke. Off the top of my head, it's the "O death, where is thy victory?" Or the reference about
where's thy sting? Yeah.
Grave, where's thy victory? O death, where's thy sting?
Right.
So that was above. And I of course could not help but think about my own father's passing. Yeah. And I felt just so filled with like a sense of comfort and reassurance, and I guess just hope, in the resurrection, and in what Christ has done for us, that allows us to not just get through trials like loss or grief or pain in this life, with more support, but also just knowing that our loved ones aren't lost from us forever, and that I'll be reunited with my father, and I reflected on his personal grit and on the grit that was exhibited by the pioneers as they passed through this stage of their journey. And what's beautiful about the Pioneer Cemetery there is, both in some of the rock that has since been installed, but also the trees around. All of those were brought in from the Salt Lake Valley. You have native trees from the Salt Lake Valley that populate that grave site now, and also the stone that was used is the same stone that the Salt Lake City Temple was cut from. And so this was a way of the church, communicating that these saints might not have made it to Utah, but Utah, eventually came to them. That this is in some ways a small patch of the promised land that they were trying to reach. So I just found a lot of beauty in that, and that really helped. I feel like my trip ended up being a spiritual and emotional roller coaster of sorts, right? Like, there were days where I felt just deep distress, and other days where I felt just like elated and so energetic. And it's been just wonderful to reflect on those experiences since, and the different takeaways that I have from them. So anyways, I'm more than happy to move to some of the
let's
photos.
talk about that.
I know that was a little long-winded, but
well, that's fine. And real quick, this is the thing, I kind of was following Jaxon on his journey as he was kind of posting it on Facebook and talking about things, and it's just kind of it's been an interesting journey you've been on. And so yeah, I kind of felt like I was traveling with you as you were going about talking about these things as well. And so yeah, why don't you let's hop on the screen share there, and let's you took some photos along your journey. I think you said you had thousands of photos. We cut it down to 25 that you're going to go over with the audience. And there's Jaxon. A little hair's a little shorter, a little less beard.
Yeah,
there,
yeah, it's true. It's true. So like you mentioned, I took well over 1,000 photos on this trip. But so I'll only share some of them, and I have intentions of talking more about this journey and this experience elsewhere, because still it's like every single site, I have like some type of story I can tell, or a reflection that I can give on how it informed both my trip and how I've thought about it since. But I just want to share a couple highlights for your audience. This is me. This was my very first site that I visited. in Sharon, Vermont. It's the Joseph Smith Birthplace Memorial. So the first day of my trip, I woke up bright and early, like it was probably 4:30, 5 or something, because I had a tight schedule to be on. And I was able to, pull up to the Birthplace Memorial a little under an hour before it officially opened, but the grounds were open, and so the sun was just coming out. It was bright. The weather was nice because it hadn't really heated up yet, and so I just had some personal time to just I guess think about my journey so far, and meditate on that anticipation, but also I don't know. I'd never been to this site before. Joseph Smith is a very important figure to me. He's definitely, I would say, second to Jesus. Been the second most impactful or influential religious figure in my own kind of faith and practice. So I really appreciated being able to see his different sites. I've interned with the Joseph Smith papers before, so his life is one of deep interest to myself. So, anyways, was able to visit. That was great. And as part of that site, there's several other kind of Smith family, or I guess not Smith family, Mack family, from Lucy's side, different sites in that area too. Solomon Mack, Daniel Mac. So those sites have been preserved as well. There's not exactly a home that's still standing here, but you can at least see the foundation. And it was neat to quickly review those. After visiting the Smith home, I was able to go to Whitehall, New York, and visit the home and barn, like farm and chapel of William Miller, the founder of the Millerite
I
movement.
just saw the Daniel chart in the back, and I'm like, "What's that to William Miller?" Yeah.
Yep. Good eye, Steve. And so I was able to visit this William Miller site. He was very influential in the formation of the Adventist movement. I had a really kind tour guide there. And what was nice too is, with many of these sites, because I organized this in advance, I was able to schedule appointments. And so I got a lot of just personal private tours with very interesting people. It probably helped that, I said that, I was at Harvard Divinity School, and folks, knew what my interests were, and were very enthusiastic to help me. But then a number of different sites to give me lodging and help with accommodations, and just folks were insanely hospitable on this trip. It was just wonderful. I only had to stay at a hotel maybe 2 of the nights of my trip because so many places I had lined up from folks that I know on social media or that I was able to get connected with. So lots of kindness. I'm deeply grateful for it. But yeah, this was William Miller's home. It was fascinating to visit. Here's what the first Millerite chapel looks like as well. A picture. I'm sorry I can't show. I mean, I have so many more photos. I could spend so much time.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
Is this chapel part of the Advent Christian Church, or is this a historic site that you're visiting?
I don't think they hold a worship there anymore. Okay. I think it might just be strictly a historical site now. Okay. But I could be wrong on that. But at least the impression that I got was that it was more historical than functional.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. But right next to it, this is also on the same property. This is called Ascension Rock. And this is where a number of followers of William Miller in the 19th century, as part of his predictions and the predictions of others. I don't think he strictly sanctioned this one, but there were a number of folks who anticipated that the second coming, that the rapture would take place on the night of, I think it was like October 22nd or something like that, right? So we're headed into the winter, and they stood out here, at this place, Ascension Rock,
Yeah.
in their ascension
White,
robes,
white
as
robes.
they called them, right?
Yeah.
White robes, yes. Very cold late at night, and they anticipated,
Yeah.
being raptured and welcoming the second coming of Jesus Christ. And for a lot of folks, speaking of disappointment, right? There have been a number of episodes in religious history
Mhm.
where maybe different groups have predictions for the end of the world or some significant event or something like that, and sometimes these events might happen, not the end of the world necessarily, but maybe something very traumatic or very important to their tradition takes place. At other times, groups have to wrestle with something called religious disappointment, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
What do you do when it feels like prophecy has failed, or expectations haven't been met, or something like that? So, while this episode can be viewed through the lens of religious disappointment, I found myself moved by the incredible faith that had to be, present and on display, for these folks to commit to something like that. And I was reminded of, in the Book of Mormon, the experience of some of the believers of Samuel the Lamanite, who anticipated the signs that he had prophesied of, that would point to the birth of the Savior. And they ended up being in a situation where is either these things would happen or they'd be put to death and they'd be severely persecuted, right? Um, and they brought themselves and their families out to wait for these signs to occur, and they had the faith to wait for that. And so I guess I was moved by the faith to engage in some type of significant action, and that's something that was just so striking to me at so many different points of the trip. I visited communities that were just starting, maybe
Mhm.
small religious groups that they were very young, others that were ancient, and yet find themselves in a place where they're, significantly worried about the survival of their tradition and of their community, and others, that maybe have died out altogether, right? And I'm just like the Shakers, for instance. Technically, there's still two, I think soon to be three Shakers left, but by and large, Shaker sites aren't populated by practicing Shakers anymore. So to visit these sites, and be struck by the wrestles that different people of different religious, groups and identities have to engage in, to sustain their communities, to grow them, to help get through trials. It was very moving. So this is just one of
Jackson,
the impactful moments. Yeah.
it reminds me because I got to go visit the House of David in Benton Harbor, Michigan. And this is a group that practiced celibacy. And I'm getting a tour with my mom. And there was a gentleman there who was the last member of the church. And he had said they were a millennial cult, not cult or group sect, And the guy said that, well, I forget the female prophet's name. I want to say Purnell, but I think it's wrong. And she goes and says, at the second coming, you'll be able to fit all the members of our movement in a single phone booth. And I thought, well, man, I'm going to be in that phone booth with you because I have a lot of respect for you being the last one.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's fascinating to reflect on, and to think of the, like I mentioned, these sites, they're not just places that you visit, right? These are deeply connected with real people's experiences and with their hopes, their dreams, their disappointments, their heartaches, and I just felt very moved by that at virtually every stage of my trip.
It's
Um,
beautiful.
so so after visiting the Millerites, um, let's see, I was able to visit the
Oh,
Shakers.
awesome.
This is the first Shaker colony, in I think it's called Colony, New York. Um, but Mother Ann Lee, who was the kind of the founder and a very significant early figure of the Shakers, this was the place that she helped establish this Shaker colony, this first Shaker community, and she died there, or well, let's see, maybe she's buried there at the very least. And like I said, I was able to visit her grave, so it's yeah, it's I found myself in a lot of cemeteries on this trip, and again with this kind of theme of grief, and processing grief. um Even though I wasn't visiting my father's grave, right, I felt close to death, in the sense of it was on my mind, and it was something that I was wrestling with, and meditating on. And so in some ways, right, um like I felt like I had passages of Ecclesiastes, passing through my mind, about just it just struck me, this sense in which the things that we have now, right, like Mother Ann Lee, for instance, um, she's in a cemetery with a number of her peers in her community,
Mm.
and the passing of time, right, there's just certain roles that all of us play in our own stories and in our own lives, right? And I don't know, reflecting on that was just really meaningful as well. So
And
that's what
it's
the Shaker.
interesting too is
Yeah,
that I did not realize she was that young. She was only 48 years old.
yeah, yeah.
And of course, your father was taking at a young age for him as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you
he
can
was
imagine
he was 46. Yeah.
that.
So yeah, and with these cemeteries, there's a lot of stories that you can learn in cemeteries, that they're not necessarily communicated through someone, telling you the story themselves, right? Like you said, you can look at how old she was, right, and think about, okay, what was that like, or maybe you stumble upon a grave marker, a headstone that belongs to an infant,
Mm.
or you can see an infant buried with its parents or something like that, right? So there's so much richness and depth, to the human experience, that even if it wasn't, written out on a plaque or told to me by a tour guide, right, that is still being communicated to me through these sites. And it was that was just a wonderful experience too. So this was a next another stop. This was all day one, by the way.
Oh wow.
Like we haven't even gotten through the first day yet. That's how jam packed this trip was. Don't worry, I abbreviated the trip for our sake,
Right.
going through these photos. But this first day especially was so had so many different interesting moments. But this was one of them, where I went to a Buddhist community in Amsterdam, New York, and I had just seen on Google Maps that this community would be on my general route headed into my trip. I'd be passing through the area, so why not?
Yeah.
Why not reach out to them? I had seen a picture of one of their temples on Google Maps, and thought, yeah, I'd love to visit them. It turned into so much more than that, Steve. Where once I got there, we sit down, we chat for a little bit. I tell them about my trip, and what my intentions are, and they say, well, we have some stuff to show you. Okay, you're gonna love what you see next. I'm sure you've experienced that at times,
Yeah.
in encountering the restoration, where, right, you meet these folks, and you're taking such an interest in them, and they are enthusiastic in showing you who they are,
Yep.
and so many facets of their belief, and you have just often, sometimes immediately, a level of access and trust that it's remarkable, it's touching, it's moving, and it ends up being a remarkable experience, right? That's very unique. So anyways, after talking with them for a bit and visiting like a smaller temple that they had in this smaller city of Amsterdam in upstate New York, they asked if I wanted to visit their main compound. And I was like, oh my gosh, of course. So they
Yeah.
have this 100-acre property that is located pretty close to Amsterdam, New York. It's in a place called Aarhusville, and they share this kind of mountain with a significant Catholic site, which is the location of several what are called the North American martyrs. Okay, there's
Mm.
only been a handful of canonized martyrs in Catholic history in the Western Hemisphere, and especially North America. and this is the site of 6 of them, I believe, 3 to 6, and it was also the first place in New York history where the Rosary was prayed.
Oh,
And so, anyways, it's a very significant Catholic site. But this Buddhist community, they've been here for over a decade. Um, they identify as esoteric Buddhists,
okay.
and so there's some relationship with Tibetan Buddhism. They're
Okay.
coming from China, and there's this emphasis on passing on teachings that have been kept secret over the centuries, passed down from master to master. And they believe that by practicing their specific dharma, their Buddhist philosophy and religious practices, that you're not just contributing to your spiritual well-being, but also your physical, your health, as well. And so they believe in faith healings, and because of that, very enthusiastically told me many testimonies and accounts of different members of their community that attested to, once I started practicing, with this teacher, their leader is called, they refer to him as the Holy Master. Once they started practicing with him, once they started doing these Buddhist this Buddhist Dharma, that they were able to be healed of certain illnesses. They maybe were able to get off. They were able to break addictions. They were able
Interesting.
to wean off of certain medications. So it is controversial in the sense that there's certain other religious groups, whether Christian or otherwise, that might emphasize their religious practice so much, that sometimes they can downplay the importance of modern medicine, or
All right.
sometimes they might opt out of it altogether.
Right.
So there can be some controversial positions that are taken there. Um,
Now, I'm just
but
really curious. It was
Yeah,
fascinating because, of course, within the Christian context, we have Christian scientists who kind of have a similar view of modern
sure.
medicine. But also, I'm just curious because now I know that the Falun Gong group has a place in New York. This isn't tied with them at all, is it? Or
No, no, no,
okay,
no.
I was just curious. Okay,
This is a different group.
okay,
But I definitely, now that you said that, I want to look into that because if anything, this trip convinced me I need to do more trips like this,
good.
because this is such a great time. But so they bring me to this compound. There's not great cell reception there, which always turns into a funny part of the story whenever I visit, any group that I'm unfamiliar with. We just met, and yet we're both, uh, extending degrees of trust to each other, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Because I would hate for, not that I necessarily expect this, but sometimes, there's times where maybe I go into a new space, a new community, and I just don't know what's going to happen, and what if there's an emergency and I need to get out of there fast, or I need to, call the authorities or something like that. But nothing terrible occurred. This site visit was so fascinating. But what's remarkable about this property, they are trying to prepare it. They're essentially trying to establish a Buddhist utopia
Oh,
along the Mohawk River.
okay.
And so they're trying to prepare the site to host several hundred Buddhist practitioners coming in from China, from other parts. And so, yes, you can see this archway. There's this staircase that leads up the mountainside, several thousand steps. And so, I get to this point and I start thinking like, oh my gosh, am I still in New York? Am I
All
suddenly
right.
in like Nepal or something like that?
Yeah. Huh.
But I continued to follow them, and we eventually got up to the mountain to their headquarters.
Hmm.
This is a former Jesuit center,
Ah,
that
okay.
they bought back in 2006,
Okay.
and have since transformed it into their Buddhist headquarters for their group. Um, and so you can see there's this kind of brown brick and stone, that was original to the building. But then up top you can see, some kind of
Oh,
some pagoda
yeah,
structures,
yeah. Uh-huh.
and colors that look far more similar to things you might encounter in
Yeah.
China,
Yeah.
or Tibet
Yeah.
or other places. And in front, you can see this statue of
Oh,
Jesus as
Jesus.
well that they've
Wow.
retained. Yeah. So they have multiple buildings that they own, not just at this site, but also in the city of Amsterdam itself, that were former churches that they've since transformed into Buddhist temples.
Hmm.
And their view of other religions is that other religions, what this group asks, for interested persons, they say, you don't have to stop being a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, whatever, if you want to worship with us, if you want to practice with us. That they believe their Buddhist practice and philosophy can be successfully integrated and incorporated and shared with other religious worldviews and practices. So they tried to exhibit that kind of openness themselves in the way that they transform these previous religious spaces. So there, some of the Catholic churches in the city that they have transformed continue to have on the ceiling or in different places. They retain the murals of different saints, or
Hmm.
certain icons or statues or things like that. So it
Hmm.
seems kind of syncretic, but to
Yeah.
them, it runs, very consistently with their outlook on other religions.
Good.
And interestingly enough, the Holy Master, he while he was from mainland China to begin with, he felt called to come and practice Buddhism and engage in Buddhist ministry in the United States, and then specifically in upstate New York, through several visions or dreams that he claims to have had, where Jesus Christ visited him and told him that this is where you need to go. That, like, it was once he visited the kind of Mohawk River area, Amsterdam, etc., that he recognized it as a location that he claimed to see in one of his previous dreams, where Jesus had shown him basically, like, this is where you need to go. And so I ended up writing a oh geez, it was like a 25-page single spaced research paper on this group this semester. And for that section, I labeled it the Buddhist led by Jesus,
Oh, okay.
because they look very favorably upon Jesus and various other religious figures.
Hmm.
And in shaping their own community, Jesus has played an important role to them. So
Hmm.
that's one reason why they
They have a
retain
neat statue.
this
Okay.
statue here. So
Interesting.
yeah, I just thought that was interesting. There's a lot more to the story.
Oh, I'm sure.
There's a lot more I'd like to report on, and I just felt like I walked into this fascinating case study that hasn't been really given much attention by
No, of course, we're still,
scholars.
it's
It's been,
relatively new, so there's very little
yeah,
scholarship
it's
probably about
relatively
it.
new.
Yeah.
And, with these utopian communities
Yeah.
in the American history, a lot of them run into tensions, right? We see this in
Mhm.
Mormon history. We see this
Yep.
in other groups too, where when certain religious groups move into an area very quickly, they start getting involved in the local politics, the local,
Sure.
civic issues. There can be tensions across religious lines, across social, civic lines, and that's all been experienced by this community too. And there's a lot more I'd like to say, but I'll save it for now.
Okay.
Um, and here's just a few more photos. This is what
Oh,
that same headquarters looks like at the
oh,
top of the trees, poking out
yeah.
from the mountain. So when you drive past it, you look over, and suddenly there's this huge pagoda,
Yeah.
this huge temple complex that is, like, resting on the side of the mountain in a very just striking way.
Mhm.
Um, so, anyways, that's what the Buddhist group looks like. This is kind of what a nearby Catholic site looks like, where the first Native American canonized saint died. Her name was Saint Kateri Takawitha, I think is how you pronounce her last name. But she was a very significant Native American convert to Catholicism. And this is a little of, like, what those grounds look like. Um, uh, th- this one on the left, this is from the Shrine of the North American Martyrs, which is next to the Buddhist temple. But I was
Okay.
able to make a small wooden cross. They had a station where they had some sticks and some twine, and you could make your own kind of pilgrimage cross. So I carried that with me the entirety of the trip. The cross is a very important symbol to me, even as a Latter Day Saint.
Yeah,
And if anything, I've been hoping to make the cross a more popular and common and shared symbol,
right.
with my religious peers, because there's some history there we could break into, but
Yep.
it's something that I'm not afraid of. I have no issue
Good
in,
for
and
you.
I take great confidence, and I take a lot of hope. I find my Christian hope on the cross.
Yep. That is
Because
great.
that's where Christ
And
accomplished it.
it's not insignificant. This is also a Catholic shrine
Yeah.
because in
Yep.
many ways the cross was viewed as a Catholic symbol. That's kind of one of the reasons that the church kind of moved away from the cross a little bit, of course.
Yep. Yep.
But we know there's a history of the cross. We have Brigham Young's wives they have
Yep.
crosses around their neck. So the cross was there at the beginning. And I often think like, hey, if anything,
Oh
I
yeah.
love as an evangelical Christian to see the cross reintegrated back into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I wish you Godspeed on that endeavor, Jaxon.
Thank you so much. Well, the thing is too, like I don't even have to feel like I am trying to combine my Mormon faith with other expressions of
Right.
Christianity to accomplish this. I just go to the Book of Mormon. I
Right.
go to what's in restoration scripture already, and the
Yep.
cross plays a prominent role in Mormon theology and in Mormon sacred texts. So I
Right.
don't even have to feel like I'm doing much
Nope.
crossing outside my own tradition for that. So yeah, it's I appreciated that too. And with all these different religious sites, or at least many of them, like visiting the Buddhists at these Catholic sites, etc. I was able to engage in shared forms of worship or spiritual contemplation with them, right? So as I'm going through this Catholic site, I have a prayer on my heart, or I'm spending time in their chapel, or I am meditating with Buddhists, or things like that, and that's all things that I feel are completely compatible with my own Latter-day Saint faith and practice. um, Here's another one. This is Saint Kateri's last words.
Mm.
Jesus, I love you.
Wow.
And another statue of her. Um, I passed through what is it? The National Monument for Women's Rights, or the Women's Rights Memorial Park
Oh, okay.
in oh gosh, it's right next to Palmyra too.
Oh, okay.
Um, let's see. Oh, Seneca Falls. That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah. So Seneca Falls, this is the Wesleyan Chapel where the women's rights charter, like an early iteration of, so like Susan B. Anthony, Frederick Douglass, other folks gather here, and they decide, what, like it's important that women have the right to vote. And they had all these articles of what women's rights are, what they're going to be advocating for, and this is where it happened. And so I loved being able to reflect on the importance of women in religious history, women in political history, American history. So this was, a lot of times when we think about some of these different political movements or social causes, whether it's abolition, whether it's women's suffrage, etc., we often think of them just in their kind of like socio-political context, right? But a lot of these movements were deeply religious,
Deeply,
and
deeply Christian,
and
deeply
and
religious.
if
Mhm.
even as they might be being argued for, pushed for, organized, and sponsored by people of faith, women of faith, different faith communities, they also experience pushback, from different faith communities too. So
Right.
religion plays this complicated role,
Absolutely.
and it can be a force for liberation. It can be a force for oppression, right? And we see that playing out in many different facets of religious history. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. This is the Oneida Community Mansion. I was able
Oh,
to visit Oneida as well.
Right.
And so that was fascinating. That's an example of a group that is no longer exists in any form. Granted, there is still I believe there's still an Oneida limited corporation that's strictly just like a business and
Right.
has like a historical background with this community.
And they
But
practice complex marriage, right? Wasn't that the
yes. At Oneida, they practice what they called a complex marriage, which was a form of these terms can be messy sometimes because they can be loaded with other connotations. When I say free love, a lot of folks would
Mhm.
just think of
Hippies from the 60s?
the sexual revolution and
Right.
the hippies, and
Yeah.
Woodstock or something like that. But Oneida was organized in a way where there were folks who were like married to like a primary partner,
Hmm.
who they would raise like children with. But the concept was that if there's no marriage in heaven, then marriage doesn't actually mean what we think it does here on earth either. And in trying to live as early Christians might, or within that same spirit, that when we are holding all things in common,
Right.
that can include others partners, right?
Sure.
And so there's a lot more to it than just
Mhm.
that. But yeah, they had some really fascinating, but also at the time scandalous arrangements at the Oneida community. It's one of the most successful utopian projects in American history. They lasted several decades, but eventually, like many utopias do, they fall apart. There's problems that enter into the community. So what's fascinating though is once they got into the second generation of folks within the Oneida community, so individuals who had been born there and raised within that same group, that their form of rebellion against
Mm.
their upbringing was
Monogamy,
embracing monogamy,
of course.
and saying like monogamy is this edgy radical thing that we're
Yep,
gonna try and do, because
of course.
we're not actually too into the complex marriage stuff. So it's
Interesting.
it's funny,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that can be said about that, but yeah, so that's a religious group that no longer practice it. It's
And
extinct.
this is the thing
There's
too,
no practitioners, but the site is still there, and
right?
it's preserved, and it was fascinating to visit.
But it's fascinating too, Jackson, as we continue on this journey, is of course this is kind of the milieu that Joseph Smith came out of, right? This was the world that he came that was surrounding him, and a lot of the influences. So we kind of get a sense of the world that Mormonism sprung out of as you're going on this journey.
Sure, yeah. And this is all still upstate New York too.
Yep.
Seneca Falls is just literally, it's like 30 minutes. It might be 30 miles from Palmyra. So it's yeah. I think that's very significant to me. Um, and yeah, it's fascinating to think about some of Joseph Smith's contemporaries, his peers, and the many ways across the American religious landscape of the time,
Mhm.
especially during the in the burned over district in the Second Great Awakening. Lots of folks are feeling disenfranchised with maybe the status quo, whether it's socially, religiously, etc. And they're trying new things. They're experimenting in many different ways. And for the founder of the Oneida community, John Humphrey Noyce, he was actually a divinity student at Yale Divinity, I believe. And so, I think this just goes to show that in terms of divinity schools like Harvard or Yale, that they've been in the business of churning out some real radical thinkers for a while, and this isn't just a liberal phase that occurred in the last couple decades or something
Mm.
like that.
Right. Right.
So, anyways, I just think that that's kind of funny. Um, Very quickly, spiritualism, another example from the 19th century of a religious movement that comes out of this area. Um, so there were two sisters, the Fox sisters, who claimed to be able to communicate with spirits through various means, and through the course of their life, were able to I mean, they created a movement that continues to this day. There's a lot of controversies that were involved with it about whether or not they were sincere, whether or not they were, honestly claiming to communicate with spirits. And so there's definitely folks during their time and afterwards that I don't know, would accuse them of being fraudulent or things like that. But in this building right here, they have the preserved foundation of the original birthplace, home of the Fox sisters. So people left some offerings or different things there, and it was just something I was able to quickly walk up to and read some stuff, and I just thought that was an interesting site I wanted to include. Moving into Palmyra,
Yeah, and
here,
this
yeah,
is the
yeah,
thing. I know I'm drawn to this because, of course, this is Alvin and his
yeah.
death and everything. But also, I noticed that it looks like I'm looking at a photograph of a young Jaxon Washburn who's about to be baptized by his father.
Yeah, yep, yep. So, when I visited Palmyra, I wanted to visit the grave of Alvin Smith, because that was something that I had reflected on a lot in his passing, in my father's passing, was feeling a greater sense of solidarity. There's been a number of studies in the ways in which Alvin's death impacted Joseph
Yep.
Smith, his psyche, his journey, his trajectory, his theology.
Yep.
And I think it's very arguable to say that Mormonism was, in some ways, you could say, born out of one man's wrestles with grief. And we have Samuel Brown, for instance. He published um, uh, oh, what's it called? It's the Mormon Conquest of Death.
Mm.
Is the subtitle, um, and basically he really goes into the ways in which Joseph Smith and early Latter Day Saints wrestled with death, like many of their contemporaries did. This is pre-Civil War, and so death kind of occupied a different place, in their society than it would for us in terms of like normalized social rituals and things like that, right? Of course, like the embalming process looked differently. People died younger, so this occupied, I feel like a lot of times today we can be more distanced from death in ways than they would have been on the frontier, in Jacksonian America,
Mm.
because you know like, let's say someone randomly died, right? Well, you would have to kind of continue to have them, maybe in your home, right? Like as you go and dig their grave, right?
Right.
Or like I said, the embalming process was different. These things took, there's a different time frame, right? So it wasn't just that someone passes away and you call the appropriate authorities, and someone from the morgue is able to come and pick up the deceased body, and then you don't see it for a week and until you're maybe at the funeral at like a viewing or something like that. No, it was the family that would be involved in the washing and the preparation,
Right.
and it was far more intimate and proximal. So
Sure.
anyways, yeah, I think it's very clear the ways in which Alvin's death was traumatizing to the entire Smith family, but certainly Joseph. We know from Mormon history that Alvin had been identified as one of the kind of
Yep.
as Joseph was needing to go visit the hill Cumorah,
Yep.
and be visited by the angel, visit the plates, etc. Alvin was the one who was supposed to go with him. He was the one that was supposed to, retrieve the plates with Joseph, and that didn't happen. And so, and we also know with respect to baptisms for the dead, or Joseph's conception of the afterlife, the ways that continued to be shaped over the course of his life. So, anyways,
Yeah.
it was very meaningful of me for me to be able to visit Alvin's grave, to
That's
reflect on that,
yeah.
and to think of just the complicated ways, that I think one, even from a naturalistic position, maybe this is a more charitable way to view Mormonism. I'm not sure, but we know that many religions seek to provide folks with answers, and with comfort and with a sense of clarity and purpose.
Right.
And even if you don't believe in those faith traditions yourself, right? Whether this is a conscious effort on the part of the individuals, or from their experience, from their perspective, it's something that they are participating in, but they are not constructing necessarily themselves, right? There's moves that are made, for folks to receive these answers and comfort, and for a lot of folks, and still today, Mormonism provides a certain clarity of the afterlife, or certain comfort at death, that a lot of folks feel like they need. So these are some of the early theological questions, that Joseph Smith was certainly wrestling with. Is what happened to Alvin, right? He was not baptized. He has, Joseph has preachers, or religious leaders, kind of, or cites them at least, from his youth, saying, "Hey, sorry, Alvin's in hell," and he was absolutely Joseph's role model, right? He was someone that Joseph looked up to, and so, anyways, it was a big turning point, I think, in Restoration history, and continues to impact it in many different ways that sometimes aren't appreciated. But I was able to visit his grave, and like I mentioned, that's the framed photo of my dad that I carried with me, whether on a backpack or in the car with me. And so I felt like that was a moment of healing for me in different ways.
Beautiful.
We'll continue to move forward. Sacred Grove was really cool. I really appreciate what they've done there, even if there's conversations to be had about whether or not this is the same grove that Joseph would have realistically visited. There's different candidates for the site, and of course this area has been transformed in close to 2 centuries, or more than 2 centuries. Let's see. Oh no, we're approaching the bicentennial. So we passed that, but it was very peaceful. It started raining while I was in there too, so I actually had to skedaddle out of there because there was thunder. But the tour there was really neat, and the rain continued as I went on to the Hill Cumorah, as it's traditionally identified. And then this picture to the right, this is where the Hill Cumorah pageant used to be held. So this is what it used to look like, as they've since tried to transform it and allow it to be restored back to more of a natural state. So I was never able to attend the Hill Cumorah pageant, but from what I understand, this is where the magic happened. So I had another appointment to make after this too, so I literally had to sprint in the rain up to the Hill Cumorah and then back down in the rain so that I could make my appointment. And it was so funny because as I'm running down the hill, at one point I slip, fall in the mud, tumble a little bit, and I'm like, my goodness, imagine carrying a bunch of plates, trying to do this, or to fight off some thugs, or
Exactly.
or I don't know. I kept having these little moments, like that, where I'd be like, oh my gosh, maybe that's what it felt like.
Joseph Smith was one strong dude.
That I just couldn't have predicted. So that was funny. Moving forward, here's a picture from Erie, Pennsylvania, which is where I was able to meet the Galeys. Nicest family, but this is a Russian Orthodox Old Believer church. It's just incredibly beautiful. I have so many more pictures. It's like every single square foot of this church is covered in a different icon, a different image, mural, etc. And I was able to sit down and speak with their priest there. And there's a lot of very interesting history there that is probably too lengthy for me to get into right now.
Not only that,
But
Jackson, but there's a lot of theology going on those
oh
in
yeah,
there too.
oh yeah, oh yeah. So he was so nice. After we talked for probably 2 hours, I was able to just kind of free roam inside the church and take pictures of what I wanted. Of course, I didn't go into the sanctuary space, towards the back, which is only
Ark of the
priests are
Covenant.
able to go back there. But a beautiful church, beautiful community, and very fascinating things there that look out for future social media or blog posts where I break into more of their story.
Cool.
Visited Kirtland, Ohio, was able to get a tour, just the general tour there that they did, which later when I met up with Lachlan Mackay, one of the apostles of Community of Christ, he was able to give me a tour of Nauvoo. But he asked me how the tour in Kirtland went. And honestly, like in terms of the tour itself, I love the site, love the history, love Community of Christ, great people. But the tour guide, he was not the best. A lot of the staff, volunteers that they have there, a good number of them are volunteers from Graceland University in Iowa. And so he was a student from Graceland. He was doing this as an internship. He wasn't pursuing, a degree in history or anything like that. So we're inside the Kirtland Temple, and we're in kind of the chapel area, right? And the tour guide explains how I know a lot of you folks, are coming from, you are LDS, or maybe you are Community of Christ. I'm not any of that, but I do just want to let you know that this is where the vision of Jesus happened, and just kind of like motions. And he's like, I don't know much about that. I don't know what's happening there, but this is where that would have taken place.
Okay.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh. Like it was just funny, I'm not trying to criticize him or anything.
Right.
But it was, it's certainly more of a casual tour. And I appreciate his work. He seemed a little tired. It was towards the end of the day. I think this was the last tour.
Okay, he was worn out. Okay.
Yeah. It was probably worn out. And he's, I can only imagine the questions that he gets on the regular, where it's like some like restoration inside baseball, and he's like, I have no idea how to help you, like. But yeah, Kirtland Temple, beautiful. And I'm deeply grateful to Community of Christ and the RLDS tradition for the care and preservation, and heart and sustained religious experiences and significance that they've put towards this site.
One of my best days of my life was spending an afternoon there. So
yeah, it's good. And I think I got a Philly cheesesteak nearby shortly after that wasn't too bad. So I don't know that I have many other positive things to say about Ohio, because I ended up getting in a not a car wreck, but my car broke down when I was passing back through Ohio. So I'll have to go and redeem some of those experiences.
Sure.
No, I'm kidding. Made it to Illinois. This is
Baha'i
the
Temple.
Baha'i, the Baha'i House of Worship. This is it's a very significant building. It's beautiful. I recommend looking up other pictures of it.
Awesome.
But I was able to visit that in Chicago. I was also able to visit the headquarters for the Nation of Islam, which not allowed into because I am the wrong skin tone. But they're very protective, actually, even though they're Muslim. Even Muslims who are white or not black are often not permitted in there. So they're a much more closed off community, and I didn't spend much time with them because I didn't want to disturb them. I wanted to be respectful, but I also, of course, was still interested in seeing their headquarters. But the Baha'i House of Worship, beautiful. Pictures aren't allowed on the inside, but it's just a beautiful place for meditation, contemplation, and their grounds are very beautiful as well. Here's a picture of me in Nauvoo.
Jackson.
Yes.
I've been looking for my Joseph Smith for President t-shirt everywhere. You ended up with it, didn't you?
Oh my gosh, yeah, yeah. I'm glad you spotted that. Yes, that's my Joseph Smith for President T-shirt, which I wore in Nauvoo appropriately, and it got a chuckle out of Locke. And he was very kind. Gave me a private tour of the grounds and the different historic sites there. This is us right in front of the grave of Hiram and Joseph and Emma. That's right there at the Joseph Smith house. So Lachlan was he was just very gracious and accommodating, and we spent several hours just discussing Mormon history and nerding out about it together. And I was able to ask him questions about, you know, how I, as a Latter-day Saint, could be a better bridge builder, or not necessarily ambassador, you know, but how I can, you know, field questions more effectively for members of my own faith tradition that might misunderstand Community of Christ or the RLDS tradition, you know, because while there's a lot of progress, I think that's been made in the last century in terms of the relationship of the two institutions and the interactions of different members, right? There's been a lot of common ground on our shared history. At the same time, there's misconceptions that can run in both directions. So he was able to give me some pointers for that I really appreciated, and that I'll definitely be using in the future, and that actually came in handy at other points of my road trip, especially once I was in Missouri.
Well, just real quick, Jaxon, you know, the
yes,
one
yes.
thing, and of course, we're probably going to have to wrap this up in a little bit, but I wanted to say that Jaxon, you know, and I have a privileged position because I also got to get a personal tour with Lachlan. Lachlan had keys to buildings that tourists could not get into, that I'm sure he let you in as well. It's a real privilege that Jaxon and I are able to do the things we're able to do. And of course, all of you know, Lachlan McKay is direct descendant of Joseph Smith, and of course came on my program to talk about the Joseph Smith photo. So let's continue.
Yeah, and I was able to have a conversation with him about the Joseph Smith photo, you know, and this was in August, so it was right around the time that you know, it had been released, and so I had some questions for him about that. And anyways, he's wonderful. I'm deeply grateful for his friendship and support over the years. And I just want to include, as a small side note, Lachlan was so kind to me when I returned home early from my mission due to some health issues that came up in the field. Literally within a week of coming home, Lachlan was among the individuals who had reached out to me because I was looking for things to do in the summer, you know, either work or internship or something. And he offered an opportunity to intern at Nauvoo to help take care of the sites there. And I wasn't able to take him up on it. I did the Joseph Smith papers instead, but that's something that he's been very helpful with. So he's a wonderful person, and I really appreciate both him and members of his tradition, you know, as cousins in the restoration. And we're wrapping up slides too, you know, so this won't go on much longer, but I want to highlight.
I wish we had another hour, man. This is just, I'm really enjoying this, by the way.
Oh, seriously, man. Like, yeah, I have so many photos and so many stories I could tell, but this is the Tri-Faith Center, which is in Omaha, Nebraska. And this is a revolutionary site where not only is there an interfaith organization called the Tri-Faith Initiative, but what makes it Tri-Faith is that at this larger site, there is a synagogue, a mosque, and a Christian church that all share the same grounds with each other. They have different buildings, different places of worship, but they all share like a common space with each other. They come together regularly for shared community events, and they specifically entered into this Tri-Faith initiative to demonstrate that people of different worldviews, you know, that bridges can be built, that we can have our communities close with one another and still retain our differences, you know, that we can respect our unique points, we can engage in common ground and across similarities, but we can also, you know, this isn't like morphing, you know, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity into like one religion. Each different group, you know, they continue to have their own beliefs, their own worship, their practices, etc. but it's the intentional community building. They didn't just happen to end up next to each other. They chose to enter into this partnership with one another. And I think that's very beautiful. And between all of these places of worship, they actually have this kind of like this kind of aquatic riparian kind of reserve area. It's like a nature preserve. And there's a bridge, a walking bridge that it's pretty sizable, and they call it the Bridge of Abraham. And they help maintain it. They have gardens that they help maintain together. So I think it's just a very poignant symbol of the kind of friendship, and goodwill that can be extended across, these different between these different faith traditions, right? I think it's possible. And then also in Lincoln, Nebraska, I was able to visit the Yazidi community. The Yazidis are an immigrant refugee group from the Middle East, from Iraq and Syria, and they are an ancient faith, severely persecuted. There's not many of them. They're definitely, I would say under maybe 1 million, let's say. I need to double check my numbers for that, but they have been largely driven out of their historic homelands in the Middle East, due to the conflicts and extremist persecution and violence, when the Islamic State, ISIS, was kind of at its peak. ISIS carried out ethnic cleansing against the Yazidis, many forced conversions, many kidnappings, murders, genocide, mass sexual assault, and so it's very, very tragic what their community has been through. But I was able to meet up with representatives from that community. They have a community center in Lincoln, Nebraska. Lincoln is serving as the Yazidi gathering spot in the United States. And so just by word of mouth, it's not like the government or anyone decided, hey, we're going to send the Yazidis to Lincoln, Nebraska. It was once a few Yazidi families got there, they tell their relatives, hey, it's safe to come. We have people here, we're building community, and word of mouth just spreads. And now there's a good number of Yazidis that are living there. They have their own cemetery that they bought that I was able to visit. They have intentions to build a temple there. This is an image of one of their temples. So anyways, they had never met a Mormon before. They had never heard of a Mormon before. Right. And, as they're asking, they were, similarly interested in my faith, right? And I tell them the ways in which, like, well, one, what is this religious journey that I'm on, this road trip? What are the sites that I've visited, and, why are they significant? And I'm able to explain early Latter-day Saints were driven out from place to place, about the Missouri extermination order, about the attempted genocide or the violence, the religious conflict that was taking place. And they were completely shocked because they had no idea that something like this could happen within the United States. They thought that this was, for them, this is a place of refuge, of religious freedom and the ability to, live peacefully and escape conflict. And so they were shocked to hear that it was ever an episode in American religious history that, I wouldn't say, I would never claim that the suffering and experience of the Latter-day Saints in the 19th century is, fully comparable to the legitimate genocide that the Yazidis have experienced, but there's similar themes there. There's places for commonality or shared experience, or solidarity. And so, I was then able to segue how, because of this background, the LDS Church today is very devoted to refugee causes. It's very devoted to humanitarian work in the Middle East. And they had me pull up videos from the church's website of the Relief Society, and LDS charities in the Yazidi refugee camps, sending them, supplies. And I had folks saying, oh my gosh, I recognize that camp. I know people that are either there, have been there, or I recognize that myself. And so some of these Yazidis, they were in tears, because they were grateful for the way, because to them, they felt like no one knows about them. No one knows about their story. They're not Christian. They're not Jewish. They're not Muslim. They're their own, faith tradition. And so they were very moved, by that kind of solidarity. And this is the last slide, actually. I was able to, after Lincoln, Nebraska, I started my return back home, but I still had to visit Missouri. So visiting Adam Ondiaman was wonderful. Visiting Independence headquarters for Community of Christ was wonderful. When I did the tour at the visitor center for the LDS that are right across the street from the temple lot, man, it was actually ended up being like pretty infuriating because the tour guide, he was an older gentleman. And so I'm sure there's a lot of traditional mindsets. There's, certain narratives that have been inherited or, just continue to be perpetuated in LDS circles. But, there's some really kind of offensive stuff that was said about Community of Christ. And that was just, completely inaccurate. And I was able to, on the tour, speak up and say, hey, actually, I was just with an apostle from Community of Christ the other day. He was giving me a tour of Joseph Smith's home, and these are, some misconceptions that I just want to quickly clarify. And so I was glad to be able to do that, but it did make me concerned still about the narratives that do persist, and the misconceptions that do persist. But yeah, was able to visit, many of the historic sites in Missouri, Carthage, etc., or not Carthage, Liberty Jail, and yeah, so it was fascinating, and just very briefly too, 2 hours south of Independence, Missouri,
Yes.
there's a sizable Mormon fundamentalist community that doesn't necessarily affiliate with any specific
right.
Fundamentalist group, so they have individuals in this community that come from the Liberals, that come from the Apostolic United Brethren, that come from Centennial Park or some of these different groups, and they've all come together to form this community south of Independence, where they are, there's a number of them who, from what I understand, are practicing the law of consecration in terms of like their economic means. They're building a temple there. And I was able to speak with them for a number of hours. They shared with me family stories about their own stories. They shared with me, aspects of their beliefs. There's an ongoing conversation happening within this community right now about whether or not to extend the priesthood to persons of African descent. And so they asked me for my historical takes on the place of the priesthood ban in Mormon history. Where did it originate? Theologically, is it supported? Is it required? Right? Things like that. And so both from my experience with the Joseph Smith papers, but also my interest in Mormon history generally, I was able to share how, it's my strong belief in kind of the academic consensus that the priesthood ban originated with Brigham Young, that Joseph Smith, we clearly, can demonstrate that he ordained Black men to the priesthood in his lifetime, and that his views on racial integration within a religious context or otherwise looked different from what Brigham Young's would later materialize as, and what would later become normative for the restoration or for the LDS Church for much of its history. So they were very kind. Like I mentioned, I was able to visit their temple, and it's very beautiful. I can't share any photos of that, but they were very gracious, and it was another one of those unexpected kind of encounters on my trip that I didn't know how things would go heading into it. I didn't know what kind of opportunities would come up, and then it ended up being best case scenario. And they were just so kind, and yeah, it was fascinating.
Well, why don't you exit out of screen share, and let's wrap this up, because I thought, first of all, what a great trip that you were able to go on, and to have the privilege to go into a temple that's going to be for fundamentalists, and that is a very interesting group. I was just talking to Benjamin Schaefer the other day, and he came from Utah to help with the baptismal font to do work on it. So you have different groups of people from the fundamentalist groups, and apparently he tells me there's actually even Pentecostals involved in this as well, which is fascinating to me. And so it's a very interesting thing that's going on there, and I don't know a whole lot, but it's fascinating stuff. But that's the thing, Jackson, is that when you go on a journey, and God told me when I did my program, before I started my program, do you know what God told me? He said, don't make any plans. That's what he told me. And so the key thing is that you can make plans, maybe you can have an outline, but you got to let him fill in the story. And that
Yeah.
sounds to me as though that as you're on your journey with your father, in one sense, along with you the whole way, perhaps you had received some healing from this journey, learned a lot
Yeah.
about yourself and learned about other people. How would you summarize this journey that you were on, and how maybe it's helped you spiritually?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was so this visiting the fundamentalist community was actually one of the last sites that I visited on my trip. It may have been kind of the last religious space that I was in. Um, and honestly, when I reflect on the trip, up to that point, um, it felt like in some ways it kind of mirrored a kind of temple experience for me. Or I had a lot of the themes and motifs from the LDS temple experience, coming to mind. But at so many of these locations, it was like I mentioned earlier, there's disappointment that's wrapped up into them. There's a lot of sacrifice wrapped up into them. There's a lot of success and triumph wrapped up into them. And so for me, it's like I started this journey in this kind of like innocent state that I didn't know, where things would go. I'm super enthusiastic. I'm gung ho. This is going great. And then, oh, lo and behold, I find myself, in the wilderness. I'm kicked out of Eden, and I
Right.
start experiencing some suffering, some hardship, some challenges. On an emotional level, on a physical level because of the fatigue, from journeying, on a spiritual level as well, as I'm wrestling, with how is this impacting my own, Mormon identity, and those things, just continued to be the case, and then suddenly I end up, the only temple I actually, well, yeah, it's funny. I didn't go inside of any LDS temples, but I did go inside the Kirtland Temple, Community of Christ, and then I went inside a fundamentalist temple. Anyways, by the time I got to the fundamentalist temple, I was able to fully tour the inside of it. It hadn't been dedicated yet, still under construction. It may have been dedicated by now. I'm not sure. I have to double check with the community. But my window for visiting was very very brief. I don't think I'll ever have an opportunity like that again. But yeah, I was able to go in the celestial room. I was able to go in the Holy of Holies. I won't go into detail about a lot of the stuff that would take place, that will be taking place in the fundamentalist temple. But it's deeply important to them, and it has some different roles today in the LDS community. Because the religious trajectories have been a bit different, but still, like it felt like that was a culmination point to me. That there's a kind of sacredness, and so I really appreciated that experience as I reflected back on it, because it took me several weeks to get to that point to Missouri, and then I drove home in like 2.5 days. So like there was a portion that, like, that turning around point, I had a choice where I could have continued to just be on the road for another week and a half maybe, but I was just so tired, and I felt like, what, I felt the sense of closure, that I had the experience I needed to have on this trip, that like I'm just going to keep going until I feel like it's time for me to go home. And once I felt that way, once I felt like, what, like I've done what I needed to do, I turned back and I went home. And yeah, so that kind of like temple type experience, or this idea, it doesn't even have to be the temple, but even just from scripture, this exile from Eden, the hardship, the separation from God, stuff like that. And then finally, that eventual restoration, that reunion, with the Savior that many of us are anticipating. I don't know. It felt like in some ways a small scale version of that. So it was very meaningful to me, and there's just so many emotions and spiritual reflections that were wrapped up into it that it's hard to just water it down into any one thing,
Yeah.
because I felt just attacked and spoken to from so many different directions
Mhm.
on the trip. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, but yeah, so it was wonderful. I would love to do it again. Maybe not with the same sites. Some of these, I don't think I need to visit the Whitmer home for a number of years. Like some of these smaller historical sites, there's not much going on there. But still, it was wonderful. It was what I needed, and I felt, yeah, I definitely feel like it was something that brought me closer to God, and
Oh,
closer to my Father as well.
very good. Well, Jackson, I
Yeah,
just want to thank you so much for taking us on your journey a little bit. We were able to get a taste of what you went through, and it really means a lot to me that you chose to come on my program first before everybody else. And since everything's happened in your life a year and a half ago, and I'm glad you're able to just kind of tell your story. And it was really cool,
yeah.
dude. You're a really awesome, dude.
Well, thanks so much, Steve. I really appreciate it. I know I've been chatting for a while, but I really appreciate and value the work that you're doing, and just look forward to the content that you generate and more of the conversations that you have. Because yeah, I from the first time we met, I think really quick off the bat, we were able to say, oh my gosh, we have a lot in common. We have a
Yep.
lot of shared interests. We have a lot of shared goals. And so I appreciate encountering and being able to be friends with a kindred spirit such as yourself.
Amen to that. Well, folks, I want to hear in the comments, what do you think? And by the way, I'm going to have Jackson send me a bunch of links that we'll have in the description. And
Yep.
and so check those out. Also, just to remind you that we will have, for those of you who'd like to financially support the show, we have links for PayPal, for Patreon, as well as our merch store, MormonBookReviews.com. And I look forward to hearing from you all. Tell us. And also, don't forget to enter in this month's book drawing. And I'll have the link to my email in the description as well. But the most important thing, folks, is just remember this: all the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.